All right. We are live, I believe. We are officially live. Mikey, say hi to everybody.
What's up, y'all? What's good?
All right. So as y'all can see from the get my thing. Good Lord. I have so many different. Here we go. All right. Just going to move my head over a little bit. As y'all can see from the description and the thumbnail, we are going to, as Mikey puts, finally have the referee conversation. Yeah.
Thank God.
Um, so I want to make it absolutely extremely clear, by the way, that like those of you who watch this show know that I give Mikey a lot of guff for the whole 2018 championship like controversy and everything like that. And I want to make it totally clear that I actually agree that the Saints got screwed in that game. Like that was clearly dumb by the refs. And I think I think that needs to be put out there. The thing that I always took issue with was the NFL fans, particularly Saints fans, but it wasn't just Saints fans, and like Bills fans have done this recently too, where they try to get the rules changed because of something that happened to their team in a situation where this kind of stuff happens to every team. Um, and my argument at the time was, well, you know what, we'll get into all that. This is we're just introing the topic. So we what kind of like brought this whole referee discussion up is there was I don't know if a lot of y'all saw it, but Flimlo Raps just put out a really good video kind of detailing what all's been going on with the NFL referees and like why things are so weird for them lately, and why it seems like they're worse than they ever have been before. And I watched that and I was like, hey, there's a lot of really good points that need to be talked about here. And they also he talked extensively about the 2018 NFC Championship game, which our boy definitely has a lot to talk about. So we are going to get into that today. If I could find I have too many fucking things put up. We're just going to do this. No, not that. Media source. Okay. All right. So we are. That's not even working. Clearly, I have the wrong thing. Okay, whatever. I was trying to put the intro up, but yeah. Okay. We got through the intro because I'm really good at my job. So, but what y'all came here to talk about or hear us talk about was the refs and how things have been deteriorating, and honestly making the NFL look bad. And Flimlo brought up a good point in his video about how the NFL kind of risks going the way of Major League Baseball if they don't kind of shape up some of their crap. And I mean, that's like, people say like, oh, the NFL's, too big to fail or whatever. But the fact of the matter is, it's not. People thought baseball was too big to fail. And I mean, eventually the NFL came in and raced way ahead of it. So I feel like despite all the controversies around it, the NBA could theoretically do the same thing if the NFL is not careful.
Yeah,
So, Mikey, what do you have to say about all this?
look, I saw that video, mostly because you brought it to my attention, and most of the stuff. Well, I understand both sides of the perspective, where it's like, the NFL, it's like too big to fail. However, this is what I gotta say on that. I personally don't think that's really true because anything can fail. The NBA, right? When for example, when Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, when they were in the NBA was at its highest mark. But then Adam Silver took over, LeBron came in the league, Curry came in the league, and like these are good players, but then the NBA kind of tanked in viewership because it just became a whole 3-point contest. That's basically what the NFL is right now shaping into. It's basically it's like who can throw for the most. If you throw for the most passing yards, you most likely win the game. If you catch the most passes, most likely win the game. If you run for the most yards, most likely win the game. There's no balance in the NFL no more. And that's what, and the proof says that if you play a balanced game, you win games. And the NFL is going into, and I understand Flemmo also brought up a good point where it's like you don't want to be, entertaining like baseball or entertaining like the WWE, because WWE, you can't even bet on it because everybody knows the stuff's fake. But baseball, you don't want to be dry as well. You want to find the inner counterpoint. And that's why a lot of people say defense is dead. Obviously, you can still play defense, but it's extremely hard to play defense without some bullcrap going on. That's just my point of view on it.
Yeah, the NFL would always find ways to make gambling a thing, even if people genuinely thought it was fake. But I think I agree with the point that you're making. I think the NFL might not believe that. Personally, I could do without the NFL pushing gambling and everything. Not that I'm super against it, but it just kind of seems like it's just saturating everything, and it colors everything that happens in the NFL, and it is kind of annoying. But I will say, when you have stuff like this happen, though, it kills people's belief. What would you call it? Trust. It kills people's trust in the organization, and that's kind of more or less what happened with baseball. With the NFL was kind of already coming up and becoming a behemoth, but because of the and it wasn't because of umpire problems. It wasn't exactly a 1-to-1 scenario. But let me see if I can fix that camera a little bit. The biggest problem that Major League Baseball had was people kind of lost interest because there were all the players' strikes. And they didn't keep up with keeping the game entertaining, like Mikey was saying. And the NFL came along and had a much more consistent product by that time. It's not like the NFL never had player strikes or referee strikes. This was another thing that Flemmo talked about in his video. But it's not like the NFL never had those controversies. It's just the NFL happened to be a much more stable product around the time baseball was having a lot of those major controversies. And it very much it took the baton and ran. And nowadays, baseball's flailing. So the problem is that it appears to be that there is some maybe not complete and total conspiracy theory style collusion going on. Maybe there is, but I don't think we necessarily have evidence of that. But we do know that there are referees who have indicated that there has been some really poor integrity on the part of some referees. There was there was I forget the name of the guy, but there was the ref in basketball who got in trouble directly for influencing games. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I don't think anything like that has quite happened in the NFL, but we do know for a fact, and Kansas City fans love to point at Carl Cheffers and be like, "Oh, look, that guy doesn't like us very much," and act like that changes everything. But y'all can see the like one of the subjects of my video is Ron Torbert, who infamously has just completely basically was part of building the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty. And the second that he got called out for it and kind of had to stop, you notice suddenly, and I said this at the end of last year's Super Bowl, suddenly the Chiefs aren't even all that relevant anymore. The only reason the Chiefs were all that relevant this year is because people kept being like, oh, well, they're still the Chiefs. Well, yeah, but y'all got to remember, if y'all went and watched the entire Chiefs dynasty, you'll notice that they were very good. Patrick Mahomes very talented, but there were a lot more situations where Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs didn't make the plays that they needed to win games, but the referees made a lot of calls. Like I said, Ron Torbert. I mean, like, I know I'm a Bengals fan, so call me biased if you want, but it's the first one that comes to mind. The fourth quarter of the 2022 AFC Championship game. Bengals had the Chiefs stopped, and out of nowhere, there's a late whistle, and the down gets replayed, and Kansas City gets a 5th down for no fucking reason, out of nowhere. And it never really got explained, never really got addressed at all. It just kind of like disappeared into the background noise. And then obviously we know what happened later. There was another really Dejon Anthony got called for pass interference in that championship too. That was, in my opinion, total BS. But people don't really like talking about how things went badly for the Bengals because we did that one annoying thing one time, and now nobody wants to give us any credit. But whatever, that's neither here nor there. The point being, there's all sorts of things you can go back, and not just with the Bengals. There was a helmet to helmet hit, several helmet to helmet hits that they never called for the Chiefs, but like in the reverse situation, it's constantly being called in their favor. And you can make the argument that why would they be favoring Kansas City? Well, Flimlo brought up in his video that the Kansas City Chiefs have actually, since their dynasty, I think probably because of like Taylor Swift and, the marketability of Patrick Mahomes and everything like that. The NFL viewership has been skyrocketing more or less as a result of the Chiefs dynasty. And it does make sense that the NFL has, the modus operandi is there. So, I mean, this is all obviously circumstantial evidence. None of it would hold up in a court of law. But I think those of us as NFL fans who can plain as day see what's happening with the referees, it's happened to your team. It's happened to your team, Mikey. You, dear viewer, it's happened to your team. I promise you. Kansas City Chiefs fans have had it happen to them. It's probably been years since it's happened to them, but Kansas City Chiefs fans have had it happen to them. My Bengals have it happening to them fucking constantly. And you know what? I don't really talk about it all that often because to me, everybody deals with it, and you gotta play better than giving the refs a potential to screw you at the end of the game. Like, you gotta win decisively when you're in the NFL, especially if you're a small market team like the Cincinnati Bengals or the New Orleans Saints.
Yeah, I feel that.
But it does also need to be talked about. But I don't like complaining about it a whole lot because to me it's just like, well, we still got to dig down and do better. There's several things that the Bengals could have done better in pretty much any game where they got screwed over by the refs, where it's like, well, the Bengals could have done this better, and maybe you don't get screwed over by the refs. I'll bring it up when it happens, but I tend not to stay on it for that reason.
Yeah, look, the thing I have with stuff like that, I think personally, it depends on the mentality you have. Now, I'm not gonna lie, y'all might say I'm full of crap for this because I talk about the no call a lot. But other than that, I don't really like talking about referees screwing the Saints because, like you said, it happens to every team. But when it's that egregious, and I understand people make mistakes, I understand. But when it's that, like when stuff happens where it's that egregious, where everybody sitting at home, everybody sitting in the stands can see it, and the only ones that can't see it are the guys that are supposed to see it on the field, that's where you have an issue. Now, if you miss a holding call from here and there, okay, if a guy's wearing white cleats and you don't know if he stepped out of bounds or not, that's understandable. But when, for example, Isaiah likes his touchdown, when you know by the letter of the law, if he has possession of the ball and he's in the end zone, that's a touchdown. Like, and I understand the ball came out, but the ball came out way later than what was originally called. Like, because he caught the ball and had 2 feet in bounds in the end zone. Like, if anything, that's more of a fumble than an incomplete pass. I mean, it's a touchdown, but like that was more of a fumble motion than an incomplete pass motion. So when everybody can see it, when the coaches, the fans, the people in the suites, everybody can see it, but the only ones that can't see it are the guys that are being paid to see it. That's where I draw the line. Like, for example, the no call. Okay, I understand refs make mistakes, but when everybody sees it, and when it is so bad that you are forced to make an apology afterwards, something ain't right.
Reminds me of and this is something I did bring up incessantly when I was a lot younger. I haven't brought it up a lot on this show because it requires doing a lot of research and nobody's going to listen to me anyway. But since we're on the topic, I brought this up a lot when I was in high school, and there's one of my best friends from high school here in the comments, Jordan Link. So I mean, he probably didn't really give a shit about football at the time. So you probably don't remember me talking about this, Jordan, but I talked about it a lot with anybody who, wanted to listen to me about football at all. So, Jacob Lawson was mainly the one who I talked to about this a lot, but the 2005 Pittsburgh Steelers national championship. What? This is fucking college football. Super Bowl. The Super Bowl that the Steelers won in 2005. Infamous for Bengals fans for several reasons. It absolutely disgusting thing to ever happen from Bengals fans' perspective. Yeah, regardless of the refs, absolutely disgusting for Bengals fans that ever happened. I still to this day, one of the greatest quarterbacks in Bengals history, I can never forgive him because he was the Steelers quarterback coach during that Super Bowl, and he has a Super Bowl ring with the Steelers, and I will never fucking forgive him. That's Ken Anderson.
Oh, that's nice.
I will never forgive him for that. But in 2005, the Pittsburgh Steelers played the Seattle Seahawks, and there were several times in that game where the refs just were clearly officiating in the Steelers' favor, to the point where it wasn't Ed Hockley, was it? Who was the guy in that Super Bowl? It wasn't Ed Hockley. The head ref of that Super Bowl with the Seahawks in 2005. Bill Levy. It was Bill Levy. You were talking about public apologies. He gave a public apology for the way that game went. He never officially said that the game was stolen. But if you go back and watch that game, knowing that Bill Levy is out here saying like, yeah, that wasn't, that was wrong. The Seahawks should have won that Super Bowl. Matt Hasselbeck should have should be remembered by everybody at the very least for that 2005 run. And he had some other good seasons before he kind of fell off near the end of his career. But never going to get that credit. And instead, Ben Roethlisberger gets 2 Super Bowl rings because one time early in his career, he basically got handed one. I mean, don't forget that the only reason the Steelers were even in that position to begin with is because Kimo von Oelhoffen targeted Carson Palmer's fucking knee in the 2005 wildcard championship game. This has nothing to do with the refs. I'm just talking shit about the Steelers because fuck the Steelers. But this is a documented example of, at the very least, referee incompetence that has been building and building and building for years. And lately, people have been starting to call out a lot more. I think largely because of the development of the sports fan community has been so. What would you call it? Enhanced. It's been bulked up as far as its influence goes, because of the internet and sites like YouTube and Twitch and stuff like that. There's a lot more communication going, and there's a lot more people who are looking at things with a much deeper scope than they did before. And it's getting called out a lot more than it ever did before, because back in the day, TV stations like ESPN, they were just worried about their ratings, but what they were really worried about was making sure that they didn't get on the NFL's bad side so they didn't lose their contracts. Now, because they have all this competition from real people like you and me, but also people who have a lot more people watching than you and me, who are taking away their viewership and saying the things that the fans actually want to listen to, which they can, which can be shown by the fact that YouTube's taking away the viewership of ESPN. And so you see these big media outlets, they're starting to call it out too, because they're realizing that we can't just bow to whatever the NFL wants us to talk about anymore. We have to act like we have some sort of edge to us. Nobody really believes it, but that's just another example, I think, of why it's because it's always been there. I mean, you can go back to the 70s, to the 80s, probably before that. I'm not as familiar with, how things were really structured quite as much like that when it comes to the pre-Super Bowl NFL. But I mean, you can go back to any era, any modern era, and you can see that. I mean, there's if it's not people actively trying to manipulate outcomes, it's insane levels of incompetence. And I think Flemlow made a good point that it got ramped up even more because when the NFL couldn't get a deal done with the referees back in 2011, the replacement refs came in and you had the Fail Mary, and then suddenly they were off. By the way, funny anecdote. We want to talk about we were talking earlier about how the Saints small market and therefore they get screwed over by the refs a lot as a result. But there was back in the time of the replacement refs. Funnily enough, I just learned this when I was doing research for this video. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Apparently, one of the replacement refs was a diehard Saints fan, and he actually had to be removed from a game because of a conflict of interest. So obviously that's not quite the same thing. That's actually kind of going against what we're talking about because the NFL stepped in and did something. But if you actually want to point something out, the fact that the NFL was able to do more about it before this recent deal, when the replacement refs were there, they stepped in and they did something about that, ref who was going to, potentially give a game to the Saints.
Yay!
And you say yay, but I would imagine most Saints fans would see that and they'd be like, yeah, well, we didn't really need that one. We needed the other one, the one where we got screwed over. We didn't need to be handed any games. We needed to have games officiated correctly so that we could go on to lose to Tom Brady in the Super Bowl.
Okay. But first of all, you're wrong. Second of all, I remember even this past Sunday, when the Saints beat the Panthers because Tyler Shuck slid and the refs threw a flag for unnecessary roughness, which was the correct call. I don't care if Tyler Shuck pulled out his inner LeBron, that was the correct call. But I was watching the Saints podcast, right? T Dirty, a Saints fan that I know, he said, man, what? So they're going to call it that Sunday against the Panthers when nothing's on the line, but they're going to not call it. Man, we need the one 2018, not the one today. And I was like, yeah, that's true. But at least we won today. But yeah, you're only about 7 years too late, something like that.
One other thing that I think, again, there's no proof of, but I think is definitely a thing that you could see the NFL doing. Maybe they're not making sure that the Chiefs win games, but maybe they're also, trying to influence a little bit so that, their cash cow keeps becoming a cash cow. But one thing I definitely think that the NFL is probably doing behind the scenes is they're probably, maybe even not directly, but I think the way that because you can see it in the way that the refs act, especially near the end of games. I think the NFL emphasizes the importance really strongly for refs to be, basically making it close for TV. Like I don't think they're actively telling them to manipulate outcomes on purpose. It could be the fact that there are corrupt refs out there who are, doing it for betting purposes, or even for, their own personal interests. But I do think that the NFL, at the very least, is probably, at the very least, doing their training in a way that influences the refs to make sure that the games are, consistently as competitive as they can be, which is kind of like a win-win for the refs in the NFL. It's a lose for the fans. All of this is a lose for the fans, but it's a win-win for both the refs and the NFL, because like for the refs, the better the NFL does, the more money the refs can make on their next contract. And ever since the replacement referee debacle, they've had the NFL kind of over a barrel, because like, what are you going to do? Get rid of us? Who are you going to get to replace us? You saw what happened last time, right?
We could get robots that don't make mistakes.
So, Jordan, I see your comment. I'm not gonna lie, I've developed a little bit of a soft spot for the Bears ever since you moved to New York City. Not quite saying like I'm gonna root for the Bears or anything like that, but when the Bears do well, I'm like, hey, Jordan's friends are probably happy. I gotta get
the Bears.
Well, yeah, okay. So you have reasons to hate the Bears, though. Like, I'm a Bengals fan. I don't think anything. The most significant thing that ever happened with the Bears is they failed to develop Cedric Benson back in the day, who they drafted as a running back in the first round, and then he ended up being a bust for them, and we signed him in free agency. He ended up being one of the best running backs in all of Bengals history. And that's literally the most clear connection with the Bears I can think. Obviously, we played them early this year, and that went poorly for us. But I mean, like, in the history of dumb things that have happened to the Bengals, that's gonna go like that's gonna be an asterisk that nobody's ever gonna remember after this year.
Yeah.
I could see you bringing it up in the future, being like, "Hey, Kyle, you said I was gonna remember it. Now I remember it. Haha." But like as far as like people genuinely remembering it, I doubt it's gonna survive much past the next couple of years. Other than like Bengals fans just bringing it up as the long list of games that we've just fucking blown for like no reason.
I still remember when the Saints put up 50 points on the Bengals.
2 days, stranger. I still remember when the Bengals. I don't even remember what the score of the game was, but relatively recently beat the shit out of the Saints, and that was fun.
I don't recall that.
Let me go find it.
I don't recall that.
I don't think it wasn't by nearly as bad as you guys beat us, but oh, that game was farther back than I thought. Shit. That was before you were born.
Huh?
We beat the Saints 31-16, and it was never really close. But this was back in like 2006. For me, that feels like, just a couple of years ago.
No, I remember last time we played, Joe. I was at the game, and then, I was nauseous that entire fourth quarter. I don't know if that was a sign that something bad was about to happen, but something bad did happen.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed that game. At least the outcome.
I enjoyed 3/4 of the game.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed the whole game.
No, that's not true.
No, I did. I mean, I can't say throughout the entire game I was having a great time, but at the end of the whole game, I can look back on it fondly, is what I mean.
Okay, about these referees, what's next?
1 sec. Browning should play the rest of the year. No. Bengals are done. It's true, but Browning should not play the rest of the year. No, shoot for a decent draft pick. No, Jordan. No, Jordan. We don't tank. We don't tank. No, tanking bad. Tanking bullshit. I've talked about that numerous times. There's a lot of things we've talked about on this channel. You know, the 2018 NFC Championship game is something we've talked about a lot on this channel. My opinions on tanking are another thing we've talked about on this channel. Fuck tanking. And no, Jake Browning should not play. I wouldn't be completely opposed to Joe Flacco playing if the Bengals want to, if Joe Burrow isn't really actually 100% and he just kind of said he was to, get back out on the field. But the fact of the matter is Joe Burrow's going to play, and because he really wants to play. And if Joe Burrow wants to play, I say let him play. He needs the reps. He's missed so much of this season. I don't think him not playing football is necessarily the best idea. No tanking. No tanking. Is it true the Ravens are called the Gawk Flock?
Uh-huh.
I don't know. I like the. I'm not entirely sure what the joke is there, but I think I know what the joke is there, and I think that's a funny joke. So yeah, we can start calling them that. We can definitely start calling them the Gawk Flock.
And this is
Tank Dell. Okay, fair enough. Brandon Hollum. Brandon Hollum, by the way. I don't recall seeing you in my chat before, so welcome.
I'm just here for vibes.
Yeah, Mikey's here for vibes, and I'm here to talk shit about the refs.
Same,
I guess. So one thing I was trying to get at earlier, Mikey, was my opinion on the outcome of the 2018 AFC Championship game. I want to make it absolutely clear that let's see. I did not have a problem with Saints fans saying they got screwed. I think they did. I did not have a problem with pretty much anything other than the fact that they tried to get the rules changed. And even then it wasn't because a lot of the talk was because later on it was because oh look, the refs never overturned any flags anyway. Look, it was just a giant waste of time. And I think it was a waste of time, but it wasn't just a waste of time because the refs didn't overturn any flags. And Mikey, I know you weren't in this camp, but a lot of Saints fans were in the camp of trying to get the rules changed over the outcome of a game just because it happened against them in that situation. It happens to every team, and changing the rule just because of something like that, especially when it potentially slows the game down. Now, my biggest argument, though, was that the referees aren't going to just stand for that. They're not going to let that happen. So you're probably just going to waste everybody's time, and they're never going to overturn anything anyway. And lo and behold, they didn't. And also, I didn't even know this, but Flemlow detailed in his video that there were a significant number of times that they went into the replay booth and they didn't. You can't say they intentionally kept the play as what it was called on the field, even though on replay it was clear that wasn't the case. But it kind of with some of these plays, when you look at them, it really looks like the only reason, especially on replay, maybe in the moment, okay, whatever, but especially on replay, there's no way that you don't have an ulterior motive for sticking with the call on the field than when it was clearly and egregiously wrong.
Yeah, look.
Which probably is what would have happened in the 2018 NFC Championship game, by the way. If that rule was previously in place, they probably would have just been no, we were right the whole time.
Yeah, look. So I know a Saints fan named Matt Moscona who said the same thing that I'm about to say right now.
I think you get
if this happened to the Bills, the Patriots, the Texans, Jaguars, Atlanta, the Bears, we wouldn't have cared as much, but we cared because it was our team getting screwed. That's what some people think. I view myself as a fair man. There's been a bunch of times Obviously, I can't name everyone right now, but there's been a bunch of times, some even this season, where the Saints got favored in a call, and I'm looking, I'm like, is that really, like, they really call that? However, I do not have a problem with the fans wanting change. What I have a problem with is wanting change, but the referees are their egos will get butthurt if because it's their way or the highway. So I don't have a problem with fans wanting change. I have a problem with how that situation was handled personally, because I do agree, yes, pass interference slows the game down, but if that call was never missed, we wouldn't have never had that change to begin with. So that could have all been avoided by that one call. Like if they would have called the correct call, none of it, we wouldn't even be talking about this right now.
Yes, but here's the question: why was that call? Why did that bad call happen? Because there is something I think really worthwhile to note. Another thing Flumlo brought up in his video, that the NFL is known to really kind of make a point when teams basically aren't in markets that they want those teams to be in. And when a team like the Rams moves from a market that they really have no interest in being in to the biggest untouched market for the NFL in Los Angeles, I think you've made a good point before, Mikey. And again, we have no direct proof of this, but we've seen the actions that the NFL has taken, and we've seen the numbers. The NFL likes having a team in Los Angeles have the spotlight. And so having the Rams go to the Super Bowl that early after moving to Los Angeles, especially considering how bad they were leading up to their move, there was the whole Mike Tomlin is the new Jeff Fisher. Let's just put it that way. And so Jared Goff being their quarterback, they kind of needed some help to get there in the first place. And despite the fact that they actually had a really good offense that year, one of the highest scoring outputs that I can remember between them and the Chiefs, I think that same season, right?
Yeah.
50 to 40
I've been
something.
saying that for years. How the Rams, the reason that the refs did not call that penalty, and Flemmo brought it up, but I've been saying it for years, and I'm not saying he hasn't, but I've been saying this since maybe since I started knowing what went down. I think personally, one, the Rams moving to Los Angeles, not only the Rams going to the Super Bowl would have benefited the NFL, because guess what? More money, because the Rams are a large market team and they're going to the Super Bowl 2 years after they moved back.
And then don't forget, a couple of years after they went to that Super Bowl, and then their offense just completely fell apart. Now, I mean, the Patriots had a good defense, to be fair, and Tom Brady's the GOAT, so that's kind of what happens there. But the Rams just completely fell apart in that Super Bowl, and I don't even think the refs could have saved them, frankly. And not to mention, there's also the markability of Tom Brady to take into consideration. So it's kind of like you had two things kind of going up against each other. But again, I don't think the NFL is telling the referees how to determine outcomes of games. I think there's some suggestions that kind of happen because the outcomes that the NFL wants, and that ends up kind of, spiraling into this, vicious circle of possibly unintended corruption. But I think there's also a lot of intended corruption that kind of gets swept up in that too, because when the culture just is that way, then people take it and run with it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, don't forget that Logan Wilson was robbed.
I agree.
in like against the same football team, the one that couldn't get it done in 2018. So the next opportunity they had to bring a Super Bowl to the city of Los Angeles. So because I mean, don't forget how, like I said, how abysmal interest it was in the Chargers. So they basically had to, and the Rams weren't really any good up until they just kind of suddenly became good with Sean McVay. And just want to talk about another guy who's just ultra marketable. Maybe honestly, maybe he personally is not nearly as marketable as the NFL has kind of trumped him up to be, which again is another example of showing how the NFL has just really tried to like force the needle in when it comes to, making one of the two LA teams relevant. Possibly at the expense of the Chargers, but at the same time, the Chargers have just consistently been so unpopular in LA kind of this whole time. Is like even now when they're kind of like, I mean, the Rams are also really good this year, so maybe it's not a totally fair comparison, but the Chargers are really good this year, and yet, like in pretty much most other markets, they'd probably be performing a lot better when it comes to attendance records, right?
Yeah.
So all that is to say that the NFL really wanted to push the Rams because the Chargers kind of weren't really working out. And, the Rams, both teams had previously been in Los Angeles, but the Rams were there a lot longer and the Rams were a lot more recent in the memory of a lot of people. So I think a lot of people were just happy to get the Rams back. And, John's not here. I know John would have a lot to say about, the LA getting the Rams back. But it is true that the Rams were in LA before they were in St. Louis. So
Yeah,
what happened, like Stan Kroenke moving them to LA wasn't really, I don't feel it was any less ethical than moving them to St. Louis in the first place.
Yeah, like I remember, and look, John has his feelings, but I remember when a lot of people complained about the moving to Los Angeles, I was like, in my opinion, they should have never left.
Yeah.
I mean, because like, why? Like, what's so special in St. Louis? Like, I've never heard of anything in St. Louis.
Well, I don't remember because I mean I was like, was it 90? Was it 94 when they moved?
You were 6.
I was not 6. I was 6 in 98. So the Rams were
2.
The Rams were already the greatest show on turf when I was 6.
Oh darn! You that old?
You shush. Okay, so I was right. It was 95. So I was alive for the original Los Angeles Rams, but I don't really remember the original Los Angeles Rams. And I don't exactly remember how that whole move went down. But as I understand it, it was basically just, it was another, team basically trying to strong arm a city into giving them a favorable stadium deal. And it was a rash of teams moving around that time period because there were a lot of teams like the Browns moved because they couldn't get a stadium deal done with Cleveland. Who were all the teams that moved in the 90s? There were also like Carolina and Jacksonville got NFL teams, but it's not really quite the same thing. Brandon's in here talking about Houston. That's another team. Like the Oilers moved to Tennessee, and then the year later became the Titans. So it was just like it was a lot of there was a lot of, and it wasn't just in the NFL. There were other sports franchises, if I recall, in the 90s that moved. The Seattle Supersonics, they moved. Now that was in 2008, but it was part of, I think, kind of that ecosystem of teams that were just, they were really trying to strong arm their cities into getting stadium deals and leaving because of it. I've always been very against all of that stuff. The only time I was ever, slightly in favor of it was when it happened to the Browns in 96. And that's mostly just because I was a petty 4-year-old. But even then, I thought it was kind of, even then, but these days I would not like if the Steelers moved out of Pittsburgh, like I would not want that for the people of Pittsburgh. Like that's not fair. Like you like I know NFL owners own those teams, but they physically own the teams. Like I think if an owner is not getting along with a city, then their option should be make it work or sell the team. I don't like it when teams move because to me those teams belong to the city and the residents of the city, and I think that's ridiculous that the owners have that kind of power that they can just move the teams like that. Like like teams are more than like the NFL is a business, football is a business, but what those teams mean to those communities are way more than the business side of things. So I've never been a big fan of the fact that happens. Like I said, I thought it was funny when I was 4 because I was a petty 4-year-old, but never been a big fan of that. But we're getting off topic here. We're talking about the refs, and the whole point is that the NFL is all about trying to expand its market share. The NFL, just like any business, like let's not say that the NFL is unique in this situation, right? But they're all about trying to expand their market share. It reminds me of when like this is a totally obscure reference, by the way, but forgive me because it's the one that came to mind. But it's like when Cartoon Network, back in like the early 2010s, or well, late 2000s, early 2010s, started this whole CN Reel programming block where they were just they were trying so hard to push live action content to capture the older boy demographic. It's like your fucking Cartoon Network. What the fuck are you doing? But it's just these gigantic conglomerates are always pushing for more and more and more market share, whether it actually makes all that much sense or not. And separately, like I'm like let's not sit here and act like the whole Cartoon Network thing is an example of unethical behavior. But I do think it's unethical when it comes to NFL teams move. Like imagine if the Saints just suddenly up and moved because they couldn't get a stadium deal done with the with New Orleans. Like that's not fair to the Saints mean so much to the people of New Orleans. That's not fair. Like they're like Gail Benson should be allowed to go wherever she wants to go. She should be totally allowed to, sell the team and maybe have the option to buy stock in another team or something like that. But NFL teams should not be allowed to leave the city that they're in. I think, period. Like, I mean, like maybe you can fold the franchise and be like, okay, we're just going to end this team. This team doesn't exist anymore. And then you go build a new team somewhere else. Like, I mean, like if you're going to give people options and stuff like that, I just don't like the whole idea of a whole team's identity moving somewhere else and being like, no, we're not your team anymore. We're this city's team. Like that. I just don't like that.
Like, just imagine, for example, if the Kansas City Chiefs were to move. That means all those Super Bowl rings, all those glory days with Mahomes and Kelsey, all of that just gone. Just like that.
Right. I mean, the only example that I can really think of with that would be kind of more or less the Raiders would be like the most recent example of that. And then there's also like, the Baltimore Colts and that whole controversy. Not that the Baltimore Colts had like 6 million Super Bowl rings or anything like that. Like I think they had one, whereas the Raiders had, more than that. But the Baltimore Colts were pretty important prior to the Super Bowl too. Johnny Unitas and his whole dominant run that extended into winning a Super Bowl. But they also only won the one Super Bowl, but they also won NFL championships before that. And that's the thing. Like, I mean, look at how that affected, the people of Baltimore. Like, they're happy to have the Ravens now, but they still talk about, how much bullshit that was that the Colts, packed up and left for Indianapolis in the middle of the night without really telling anybody.
Yeah.
That was another one that wasn't in the 90s. That was in the mid 80s, but that was still part of that rash of NFL teams just up and moving because they wanted more leverage against the cities, which is bullshit.
Yeah.
I think the Raiders. I think also actually, I think the Raiders might have moved out of LA the same year. Was it that the Rams moved out of LA to St. Louis? I think the Raiders moved to Oakland. Now, obviously, Oakland is much closer than St. or at least it's in the same state. I don't really know what the distance is because I know it's like opposite, like Los Angeles is in like Southern California and Oakland's like pretty far north. But I also think it's almost certainly closer than St. Louis.
I remember recently when the Raiders moved to Las Vegas. I remember because when the draft order, sometimes NFL Network, back when I had that, they would have like the NFL draft order. I remember when they said the Las Vegas Raiders had that selection, I was like, what, are they just named the Oakland Raiders because they play their games in Las Vegas? No, it turns out they moved, and I was like, huh?
You didn't know that the Raiders moved to Las Vegas at the time?
No, bro, I was like 10 or 11. I didn't even know what technology. Well, I knew what technology was, but I wasn't like on technology. Like nobody told me that they moved. So when I'm looking, I'm like, what?
Okay, so when I was 10 years old, I don't even think smartphones had been invented yet. The internet existed, but like it wasn't like this constant pervasive. I mean, it was constant and pervasive with like in certain aspects, but not in the same way that it was today. Like the constant connectivity that we have today is what wasn't the case when I was 10 years old, which was 2002.
Old.
Shut up.
Okay.
But when I was 10, we didn't have that constant connectivity. We didn't have et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I was still very aware that the Jacksonville Jaguars and the Carolina Panthers got NFL teams in 1995 when I was 3 years old. Like,
Well,
I'm not saying like it would make sense to me that a normal 10-year-old. Then again, I don't. You have said before that you didn't used to be as into football as you are now, so that could also be a thing.
like back then, like I was into football. Like I'm not gonna lie, even during the no game, I cared, and obviously I wanted the Saints to win. I was rooting hard for the Saints, but there would be some games at the top season where I would just like I wouldn't even watch because I wasn't that into football. And like I think around the time when the Raiders moved to Vegas, because I was like self-aware and I was like aware enough to know who the teams were. Like I back then, and I still can. I could probably like name all the teams in like less than 50 seconds. So like I was that much aware. I just wasn't like because like I studied football, and that's when I started becoming a football fan. But when I saw the Raiders move to Vegas, because I didn't know that teams could move. I didn't know that it was a thing. I didn't know teams could just move. So when it said Las Vegas Raiders from the draft thing, I'm like, huh? Like what? Did they just like change the name of the city? Like what?
Right. So I guess that's where I guess that's where my confusion comes from, because when I was 10, I was definitely, like listening in on what was going and watching in on what was going on in the NFL enough to at least know. I don't think any of the teams moved. Well, I definitely know none of this. Well, no, the Houston Texans. That was the year the Houston Texans started, and I definitely remember the Texans coming into the NFL being a thing. So it's for 99% of 10-year-olds, yeah, they're not going to know about the Oakland Raiders moving to Las Vegas, and and you probably fall into that category. But it is a little disorienting for me because of how much into football you are now to think that you may not have been quite that into football. What, 6 years ago?
Mm-hmm.
That's wild to me.
But I started being a football fan in 2018 when, I've previously mentioned a bunch of times, first game I ever watched was the Minneapolis Miracle. However, that wasn't the start of me being a diehard fan. Like I think the second time we played the Vikings in the playoffs, that's when I became a diehard. I remember wearing the I specifically remember when we were down 10 points in that game. I had a Drew Brees jersey on that my grandmother gave to me, and I remember throwing it. I remember taking it off and throwing it across the room. I remember crying whenever the Vikings scored that game-winning touchdown. Like that's when I started. Like I was nonchalant with it. Like even we got blown out by Atlanta that same season, and I was like, well, it happens. I didn't even hate Atlanta as much as I do now. So it's like, that Vikings game, I think that definitely started me being a diehard, if you want to call it that.
I don't know if there was I can't really think of a moment that I became a Bengals diehard, right? Because I was going to those Bengals games with my dad. I can't even remember the first Bengals game I went to. It would have been somewhere around like the 95, 96 season. I'm going to guess probably, or it might have even been the 97 season, because that was the year Boomer Esiason came out of retirement to come play for us. And I think that was the year. I think 97 was probably the year I first started going, because I remember people talking about Shake and Blake and the whole Jeff Blake phenomenon. I remember that being like a thing, but I don't remember really going to any of those games. I don't think I did. I remember being into it. I remember I was a big fan of like Darnay Scott and even Carl Pickens. I didn't understand how much of an asshole he was, and I just liked the players, and Corey Dillon stuck around for a while after that. But I remember that just kind of being like a thing that was out there. I don't remember that being something I was like, I might have gone to the training camps or something like that. And maybe that's why I was like really familiar with the players. But I think it was that 97 season, because I remember, I remember building a lot of hype about how Boomer Esiason, about going into the Jeff Blake stuff. And then I remember, there being a lot of hype about Boomer Esiason, and then going to the game with Boomer Esiason. For all I know, that could have been my first game. It was so early for me that I was going to those Bengals games. I don't know if there was a moment or a game or a year that I became a diehard. I think I was just raised as a Bengals fan, and that's all there really is to it. I mean, like the 2003 season when we, with like Carson Palmer's rookie season with, when we got like Marvin Lewis, that was like when I really kind of started getting like into it and like getting hyped about everything. But I had like, Bengals shirts, and had like the books with my face in the fucking books, and I like had all the players' autographs and stuff like that. So I don't think there was a moment I became a Bengals fan. I just think I always was.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, there was even some times where I would not even like. I was big into Madden, and that's really how I started becoming football. Like I wasn't even, I was watching football before I played Madden, but then I remember I saved up to get Madden 18, I think it was, and just playing, because that's when Madden was good. And I remember playing it, and I was like, man, this is some fun stuff, man. So then I started watching football more and more. And yeah, and then the Saints became my team. And it's weird. When I started watching Saints, that's when we made those 4, right? Yeah, it was 4 consecutive, or was it 5? 79, 20. Okay, I think it was 4 consecutive playoff runs with Drew Brees. And then I'm like, I'm not gonna lie, I literally thought it was illegal. I thought the Saints were guaranteed a playoff spot every year because we would make the playoffs every year. And then Drew Brees retired. I'm like, it's not that easy anymore. But I genuinely thought the Saints had to be in the playoffs every single season. I genuinely thought that. I'm not trolling. I literally thought that had to be the case.
Well, what's actually funny, like on the opposite end of that, I grew up in the 90s, which are ground zero for the Bengals being like, I mean, as bad as the Bengals are this season and as disappointing as they've been the last few seasons, it's nothing compared to how abysmal they were in the 90s. So I had a similar belief that you had, but on the opposite side, I believed that there was some sort of rule that the Bengals weren't allowed to be in the playoffs. Yeah, I just thought that was like I think up until I was probably like 10 or something like that. But like when I was a child, like a young child, and didn't understand how things actually worked, or didn't understand the Bengals. No, the Bengals are actually just that bad. I thought there was just some sort of rule, like, oh well, you know, the Bengals are a different type of team that doesn't, you know, they don't like, kind of like in college, you know, like there's a lot of teams that you can't they can't play in the national championship game because that's not how the national championship works. Well, the Bengals are just one of those teams that they don't get to go to the playoffs. You know, that's they're not at that level. And I was right, they weren't at that level, but it was because of their play, not because of their designation.
Yeah, I mean,
that's how bad they were back then.
Yeah, I mean, I remember. But then it's weird. Because I remember the year that we lost to Minnesota the second time. The obviously, you know what the talking point was. The entire week they were like, "Oh, the Minneapolis Miracle," but hey, we might get them this time. We got something.
I do think it's really funny, by the way. It really, like, I mean, maybe not that funny. You obviously are not going to think it's funny, but I think it's like a really cruel twist of irony that you got sold on like as a child, like your formative years growing up, like, you know, being told that like, oh, you know, you got the privilege of being a Saints fan. Look at this awesome team that does all this awesome stuff, and the second you start getting into it, they like collapse and suck.
I know. It's
terrible.
Like, I was born the season of it. I was born the season right before the Saints won the Super Bowl, and it's like, bruh, why was I not born 10 years earlier or something? Like, man,
it's like it's once again, it's like the opposite for me, because like when I was growing up, it was just like we go to Bengals games so we can watch our favorite team play football, and that's really all it is. They're probably going to lose, but we're going to wear Bengals stuff and we're going to shout "Hoo Day," and that's just what you do. It's for fun. Same reason, you know, people play stupid fucking video games. You don't understand why they like that game, but they like that game, so why the fuck not? So that's just the fun thing that we do, is we go to the Bengals games and we cheer for the bad football team. And then when I did kind of start really getting into it, they started becoming competitive finally. Like it was like, you know, like I said, the 2003 season was probably like the first year that I was like really, really interested in what was going on with the team. I remember 2002. I remember how bad that was. We were 2-14 that year. It was bad. I was like Dick LeBeau was our head coach, and he ended up becoming a Hall of Fame defensive coordinator with the Steelers. But I'm going to leave that one alone. So, but that was the year where things kind of started turning around for the Bengals. Because, like, yeah, they never won a playoff game with Marvin Lewis, but they got to the playoffs, Mikey. And, like, at the time, going to the playoffs was like especially for me. I was born in 1992. I was born the year, Mikey, that they started being bad. Like the previous year, I think 91 they kind of started falling off a little bit, but the year before that was their last ever playoff victory. You know, the 1990 season when they beat, I don't remember who they beat in the first round, or no, it was they beat. Can't remember. I think that they beat the Houston Oilers in the first round, and then it might have been the other way around. You know what? I'm gonna look it up. But point being, they were awful for, you know, my entire developmental years, and I was just basically the expectation I got used to was just this team is awful and never going to do anything. And, you just got to take the fun where you can get it. And then I start getting into the team and suddenly they're competitive, and, only recently they got super competitive and now they're not, but for, to some extent for different reasons than that. But like this year, I really believe if Joe Burrow hadn't gotten hurt, they would have gotten it together and they would have been fine. I mean, they started 2-0 with them. So.
Yeah, I feel like if the Saints can build around Tyler Shuck, I feel like we could contend for a playoff spot as early as next year because this division ain't scaring me.
Well, that's more or less kind of what happened with the Bengals and Carson Palmer. Is kind of what I'm saying. By the way, it was the Oilers we beat, and then we lost to the Raiders, and that was indeed the game where we injured Bo Jackson and his entire career ended.
So that's why y'all cursed.
That's a lot of people have said that's why we were cursed, and the curse finally lifted. We didn't go to the playoffs until 2005, which was year 3 of Carson Palmer. But back then, quarterbacks didn't play like right away. So 2003 was kind of like Carson Palmer's like adjust to the NFL year, and then 2004. Was like the real like the way that we think of rookie seasons for like top drafted quarterbacks now. That was Carson Palmer's 2004 season, because the year before that was just his introductory get your feet wet year. And then 2005 was when we went to the playoffs, because that's when everything kind of clicked, and that was the first time we had been to the playoffs since 1990. And you want to talk about it feeling like everything changed. It really felt like everything changed. And that just happened to be when I started really kind of getting into the Bengals. Because I remember in 2004, I think it was 2000. It was either 3 or 4. I remember me and my dad were getting ready to go to a Bengals game. It was like a Bengals-Chiefs game. And the Chiefs at the time were undefeated. And the Bengals were kind of seemed like they were maybe kind of getting something together with this whole like Marvin Lewis guy. And Carson Palmer was starting to develop a good connection with Chad Johnson. And at the time, still just Chad Johnson. But we had the Kansas City Chiefs, the undefeated Kansas City Chiefs on our schedule. They were like 8-0 or something like that. And Chad Johnson, you want to talk about how guarantees make you a legendary figure. Well, Chad Johnson guaranteed to the newspapers that we'd beat the Kansas City Chiefs. And he got laughed at, et cetera, et cetera. We went off, we beat the Kansas City Chiefs, and everything from that moment was different for them. It was like the Bengals were never again that 90s team that I grew up with. From that point on, they were always the team that does pretty decently half the time in the regular season and then loses in the playoffs. But the first time, it was because Carson Palmer got hurt because, as the aforementioned Kimo von Oelhoffen targeting his knee and being a complete and utter degenerate fucking asshole. And I could go on and on about Steelers fans and their reaction to that, but I won't. Let's just say there's a certain Jaguars fan who has been in my comments a couple of times who very much reminds me of a lot of Steelers fans from when I was growing up. And you want to know a reason why I hate the Pittsburgh Steelers as much as I do, Mikey? It's because of those motherfuckers and the way that they celebrated and cheered and et cetera, et cetera. The fact that Carson Palmer got injured, like right after it happened at the game. I was at that game. It was the Bengals' first playoff game since 1990. And we should have won that game because, they got off to a hard start with Carson Palmer, and they were, they won division that year. I think they had swept the Steelers that season. And it was pretty clear that the Bengals were probably going to win that game. And a lot of Bengals fans say we were going to go to the Super Bowl that year. I don't know. The Colts were really good that year. Now, the Steelers obviously ended up going on and winning the Super Bowl, but I think the Colts probably would have won that year.
Yeah,
I think that would have been back-to-back Super Bowls for them too.
Yeah. I remember before the Saints-Panthers game this Sunday, I was doing some research. This doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about, but I just want to throw this out there. Apparently, the Saints adapted something called a diddly poo game. back in 1996.
Do what now?
So when Jim Mora was the head coach for the Saints, in 1996, he famous like when we lost to the Panthers, I think.
Oh yeah, that quote. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, Jim Mora said, "Man, we gonna do diddly poo," and then he resigned the next day. And I just realized on Sunday that he said that. And I was like, "Man, Jim Mora, that's a head coach that I wish I could grow up to watch."
Yeah, that's kind of what we got out of Bruce Coslett. Not in terms of him being funny, but in terms of him resigning in disgust at what he was like. He was told, you got to coach this football team, and he was just like, eventually he was just like, what you're giving me to work with, this is completely unacceptable. So he just fucking quit. That was our offensive coordinator when we went to the Super Bowl in 1988. By the way, the Bengals ended up bringing him back to be the head coach in the late 90s after the whole Dave Shula experiment like bombed. But they brought Bruce Coslett back, and Bruce Coslett actually, I've always argued that Bruce Coslett gets a bad rap in Bengals history because like he actually like the Bengals actually got better when Bruce Coslett came in because like with Dave Shula they were consistently like a 3. Like when we talk about the Bengals were so bad in the 90s, the worst part of it was Dave Shula's tenure from like 1992 to 1995. It was awful. Bruce Coslett comes in. I think Dave Shula got fired mid-season, and Bruce Coslett comes in and almost takes into the fucking playoffs. And then they're competitive for a couple of years there. They were like 7-9 the next couple of years. Like they were almost like right on the edge, but the Bengals kept fucking with Jeff Blake. And like they should have just committed to Jeff Blake, I think, but they really wanted to find somebody other than Jeff Blake for some reason. And they ended up going on drafting Achilles Smith, and look how that fucking worked out. But the thing is, like Bruce Coslett did a good job with the Bengals for what he did, and his last season didn't go well, but I don't think it was his fault. And that's exemplified, I think, by the fact that he, like I said, he resigned in disgust halfway through that season because he's just like, what am I even supposed to do with this stupid team?
Yeah, that's how I feel.
I was doing this one video series on like should Mike Brown be redeemed around the time of the Super Bowl. You might remember that. And I was talking in that video about how Bruce Coslett is. I was thinking about doing a video by itself just about how Bruce Coslett should be remembered more fondly by Bengals fans. Like not in like, oh, the great years of Bruce Coslett, but like, oh man, Bruce Coslett, like, that should have gone a lot better than it did. Like he should have been able to do a lot more with the Bengals than he was able to do. Dave Shula was incompetent. David Klingler was incompetent. But if they had stuck with Bruce Coslett and given they had spent more money in free agency and really done a better job overall of supporting Bruce Coslett and committed to Jeff Blake, I really believe that the late 90s Bengals would have come up a lot faster than 2003 when Marvin Lewis and Carson Palmer got it done.
Yeah.
And then it would have only been half a decade that we would have been disgustingly awful. But that's a normal amount of time to be rebuilding. It's like, 3 to 4 years. Rebuilding for a whole damn decade that's insane.
I mean, the Jets have been rebuilding for 50 years.
Yeah, the Jets did also like go to the AFC Championship game in back-to-back years.
And they've been rebuilding since.
Since then, they've absolutely been rebuilding. That's true. But it's just like, I'm not saying that teams don't rebuild for 10 years straight. I'm saying it's notable when a team's rebuilding for 10 years straight, right? Like if the Saints don't get it together here in the next couple of years, they're risking that kind of being thing. But like when you think about teams that have been rebuilding for 10 years, probably the Saints back in the day probably come to mind. But like, I mean, you're thinking about the Jets, you're thinking about the Browns. You're not thinking about
I think they were rebuilding for 20 years when they started.
Yeah.
We started playing football in 1967, and we didn't make the playoffs till 1987. You
could argue that the Buccaneers, prior to, suddenly making the fucking Super Bowl in 2002, that was a wild thing. with John Gruden getting it figured out up there. But you could argue the Tampa Bay Buccaneers were like in a permanent state of like they came into the league rebuilding and just never stopped until they finally figured something out in 2002. And even then, they didn't really get it figured out. Like they were even rebuilding through the Super Bowl. Like the Super Bowl year was almost kind of a rebuild year because they were playing Brad fucking Johnson. And after that, they continued rebuilding because like they fell completely off the map after that. I think they might have gone to the NFC Championship game at some point, again at some point. But they completely fell off the map, and John Gruden ended up getting fired like 5 years later because of how bad the team was kind of performing. And then they continued to rebuild. It was basically they only kind of came out of rebuilding mode when Tom Brady showed up. Yep. The entire rest of their whole history, they were just in a constant, perpetual state of rebuilding, even when they won the Super Bowl, which is crazy to think about it. But they,
now the Buccaneers are rebuilding now.
I don't think the Buccaneers are rebuilding now. I think it's possible the Buccaneers might go into rebuilding mode. If they fall off this year and don't win the division, I think it's possible that they could kind of go into some sort of rebuilding mode. But I don't think they're currently rebuilding. I think right now they're trying to continue the momentum that they had with Brady, and they're semi-successful, but not as successful as I think they'd like to be. So I think I do think that if they don't win the division this year, they'll probably start rebuilding, and Baker Mayfield will be very unfortunate to be in another situation where he can't fucking get out of. I mean, I guess he could get out of it, but where he's stuck in a team that's just like in never-ending rebuild mode.
No, the Buccaneers. No, you know what they were rebuilding? They were rebuilding their reputation on losing to the Saints.
Had to throw that one in there, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean they swept us last season, so they got to rebuild their reputation.
Yeah. I wish I had something like that to say about the Bengals. I could say that, prior to like 2018, I was able to say that about the Ravens, but I can't even fucking say that about the Ravens anymore because Lamar Jackson has very much developed a winning tradition against us.
Yeah, and they put y'all in the fryer and baked you at 350 till golden brown on Sunday.
I'm not even talking about that game. I'm talking about in general, like Lamar Jackson. And that wasn't even because of Lamar Jackson. Like that was just the Bengals being completely incompetent. Like Lamar Jackson didn't even have that great of a game. He had a couple highlights, but it wasn't like a classic Lamar Jackson game. It was just the Bengals being completely fucking incompetent. Somehow the offense just was incompetent in that game too.
He wasn't confident.
Yeah.
I mean, I told Burrow to throw a pick six, and he listened to me. So.
Yeah, well, that's his first problem is listening to you.
Okay.
I mean, when it comes to like you telling him to do bad things, that's probably a bad thing, right? Like, am I wrong to say that?
Nah, bro. It was just perfect timing, though.
I hate you.
Nah, because you said Joe Burrow throws. I was like, pick six. And then you're like, and it's pick six.
Yeah.
I'm like, I'm sorry. I was questioning if I should remain in your stream or if you were just going to kill me.
I try not to ban people on this channel. You've seen it. I give people every single chance. I mean, shit, Jim's still allowed on my fucking channel despite half the shit he's pulled. I try not to ban people. Yeah. Sometimes there's just, like I said, that fucking Jaguars fan who keeps creating new accounts, by the way, to come like harass me more. Like that's not good for anybody. Like it's not just about me. It's about like I don't want you guys to have to deal with that. That one Patriots fan who was once a member of this community who just decided to throw it all to the fucking wind. And I still don't know why he just fucking turned like that, but there's been a couple of people I've had to pull the trigger on, but I really try not to.
Yeah,
I really try not to, but Yeah, to get back to the officials, speaking of really trying not to ban people, the NFL definitely really tries not to fuck with the officials. But I don't think it's because the NFL. I think part of it is because the NFL kind of wants to have. I think they like having the refs as a scapegoat because it's easy to point to the refs and be like it's their fault, and then fans just kind of like it's the NFL is able to do like a lot of shady shit. And then they're like, "Oh, look at the bad call by the refs," and then like all the NFL fans stop paying attention to the shady shit the NFL is doing, and so they just, like, oh yeah, that was a bad referee call, and then people talk about that for 14 years straight. But with all this, like, the NFL denies like medical coverage to people who had like major CTE problems, like through like they should have had medical coverage through the you know like the NFL's veteran program and everything like that, and they are able to do shit like that because people are more paying more attention to the refs, and then the NFL likes it that way. And as we mentioned earlier, it doesn't help that it doesn't help that the NFL is kind of also between a rock and a hard place with what to do with the refs because of the bargaining agreement that they were basically like held over a barrel and had to sign. But I think the NFL. I think at this point the NFL. I think they like it the way it is because like I said, the refs are an easy thing to point to and be like, look over there.
Yeah.
So, but I do think eventually it's going to bite them in the ass. I do think that like eventually. I mean, I said the NBA earlier. I don't know if the NBA is actually going to take over because like I feel like the NBA.
Don't know.
I feel like the NBA had its chance to take over in like the best chance the NBA ever had to take over was like the late 2000s. And they failed to, I mean, like people started, I think the viewership for the NBA went up at that time, but they failed to make it stick. So like it's going to have to be something like soccer becomes super popular or something, like, because like baseball ain't taking that mantle back.
Yeah, I mean, I think personally, I still like watching the NBA. It's just annoying as heck because, like, the NBA, you know how they say the NFL is just a passing league now? Well, the NBA is just a three-point league. Like, if you make the most threes, you're gonna win. Back in like the 90s or even the early 2000s, if you shot 10 threes, they would act like you just did something that no one could ever dream of. Now, if you shot 10 threes, that's a bad night.
I mean, back when you were allowed to play defense, like my boy Gary Payton.
Yeah, with the glove, yeah.
Yeah, dude, that dude, like, we were talking about teams moving. I even brought up the Sonics earlier, but just like, man, that one hurt because I really liked the Sonics, and like, I mean, I can't like the Thunder because like people are like, oh, why don't you just become a Thunder fan? You're not even from Seattle. Like what do you mean? Like that was such bullshit that happened, and you want me to just like suddenly embrace the Thunder, which are like a bastardization of my old team? Like fuck that, fuck the Thunder. I mean, like I don't really have a basketball team. Part of it also like part of it is just like I've never really been a big NBA guy in the first place. I liked the Sonics because I thought they had cool jerseys and some of the players like I gravitated to over the years and stuff like that. But like I was never really the biggest NBA fan in the first place, just because like it always just felt like it was more about like the flash to me, and you could see the way the NBA is today, like you said with all the threes. I feel like the NBA is kind of more or less always had that kind of vibe to it, whether or not they were actually doing that like hardcore the way they're doing it now. But I feel like that's always been the way the NBA's tried to purport itself. And that's always just kind of turned me off about the NBA. So I like college basketball now. Historically, not in so much in recent years, but still historically, I'm a Kentucky fan, so maybe I'm a little biased, right? But like I always just felt like college basketball was a lot more competitive and a lot more fun to watch than the NBA. Like the NBA was flashier, yeah. Like there's like more high end talent that you get in the NBA, but I always felt like it wasn't nearly as like truly competitive because it's like the Lakers the Lakers and the Celtics and whatever they just are always fucking dominating. You know, LeBron shows up in the NBA, and then it's like, you know, yeah, there's a couple new teams that are dominant, but it's always the same fucking teams. You know, like
Yeah.
at least in the NFL, every once in a while the fucking Bengals will end up in the fucking Super Bowl. You know, every once in a while the Los Angeles Rams will get, you know, a probably unwarranted boost by the NFL via the refs, which was kind of the whole point that we were talking about here, and they'll end up in the Super Bowl. You know, every once in a while, the Atlanta Falcons will end up in the Super Bowl and lose 28-3. Threw that one in there for you.
Yay.
You know, teams like the Philadelphia Eagles, I know they feel like they're like, you know, an always in it type of team now, but like that's a very recent development. Even the Kansas City Chiefs dynasty. Even you want to talk about how it seems like it's always the same whatever teams and whatever, but just like, you know, go back before Patrick Mahomes, the idea that the Kansas City Chiefs were ever going to have a dynasty was like laughable, honestly, because they weren't a super poorly run football team. It's not like they were like constantly like they weren't like the Bengals where like, you know, they just like never have a hope and a prayer. Like, I mean, you know, they had Joe Montana at one point and they went to back AFC championships. And, you know, even with Alex Smith, they made a pretty solid run. And, you know, they've had their, you know, they've had a lot of like being semi-relevant, but not really like top irrelevancy. But the idea that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to be a dynasty, then again, say the same thing about the Patriots. The idea that the New England Patriots, like, I mean, you go back to like, you know, you go back to like the mid 90s, you know, like you go back like 6 years before Tom Brady turned that team into a dynasty. And the idea that the New England Patriots of all fucking teams, at that time, the only thing the Patriots ever did was get creamed by the Bears in the 1985 Super Bowl. And then, you know, Drew Bledsoe took them to the or not Drew Bledsoe, it was and that was Drew Bledsoe. Yeah, Drew Bledsoe took him to the Super Bowl and lost to Brett Favre in '96. But before '96, it was like, dude, the Patriots, the who? They're going to be the greatest team in the franchise, the greatest franchise in NFL history. Like, that's going to who? The who? The Patriots? They're ass, dude. So I feel like you don't really get that in the NBA. Like the Charlotte Hornets aren't ever going to have a dynasty. You know, they don't ever have any shot of having a dynasty. The Sacramento Kings are never going to get there. The New Orleans Pelicans, I'm sorry, are never going to fucking get there. You know, maybe they get lucky and they have like a Milwaukee Bucks type of run, right? But like even the Milwaukee Bucks are not going to become a dynasty.
Yeah, I mean, in the NBA, there's not really any more dynasties no more. I think the only team,
Yeah, but
and Kyle, you might not like this, but I think the only team that has a chance to be a dynasty is the Thunder.
Yet they haven't won one yet.
Huh?
They haven't won one yet.
They have.
When did they win?
They won this year.
It shows how much I pay attention to the NBA, but that's garbage.
Yeah, they beat the Pacers when Halliburton tore his Achilles.
I remember that. I remember that because I actively tried to not pay attention because I hate anything that reminds me of Indiana basketball, and I hate the Oklahoma City Thunder. So I was just like, this is the worst possible outcome. I hate this. This is a terrible, awful, disgusting finals, and I never want to think about this ever again. It'd be like if the I mean, could you imagine? It'd be as disgusting as if something stupid like the Baltimore Ravens playing the San Francisco 49ers in the Super Bowl happened. Like, can you imagine if that happened? That'd be awful.
Could you also imagine if randomly, like, the lights just went out, so you didn't have to watch it?
I did have to watch it though. And I want to all those Ravens fans who like shitting all over me. I rooted for y'all in that Super Bowl. I'm that petty that I rooted for a division rival to beat the San Francisco 49ers because the 49ers beat us in the Super Bowl twice before I was born. I'm that petty. The Ravens, as annoying as Ravens fans can be, the Ravens have never. I mean, okay, so in recent years, Lamar Jackson has kind of had a run over the Bengals, which is annoying and whatever. But like overall, the Ravens have never really bothered me all that much. Like I like, Baltimore enough as a city. I think the Ravens have a cool as fuck color scheme. I didn't like the fact that the Browns left Cleveland, but like I said, at the time I was 4 years old and I thought it was funny. Since then, I don't think it's as funny, but I don't, necessarily harbor any ill will against Baltimore and the Ravens because of it. Because that's another example of the fact that just 10 years before that, Baltimore got screwed out of their own NFL team. It's just the cycle of, owners being stupid. I do think it's kind of funny that they put the I do think it's kind of funny that they put the Ravens in the AFC Central at the time, and kept them in the same division, only to bring the Browns back to the AFC Central, and then create that like what should have been one of the most dynamic rivalries in NFL history, except for the fact that the Browns Part 2 ended up being the biggest disaster of expansion franchises in basically all of sports history.
They did do that.
They I don't think they've even ever won the division, if I recall. It's like they beat the Steelers in the playoffs, but I think the Steelers won the division that year, didn't they?
Yeah.
And then there was the 1 year in like the mid 2000s, like 2007, I think they had like a 10-6 record. But I think the Steelers won. It might have been the Ravens that year. ...2007 NFL season, the AFC North was won by the Steelers. Yeah. Oh God, the Ravens were 5-11. I don't know why I thought that they. Right. That was the year that they ended up drafting Joe Flacco. So that's they had to have had a bad season. Bengals were 7-9.
Dang.
That was a dumb year. The 2007 was a dumb year. I did not have fun that year. And then the next year we created Fitzmagic. Because Carson Palmer got hurt and Ryan Fitzpatrick was our starter for most of that season. And that was the first Fitzmagic season because we called him Crazy Legs Fitzpatrick because he was like scrambling around and stuff like that. And he went on to go to the Bills after that. And, he was pretty much – he was with the Rams before us, but he didn't really do anything with the Rams.
That's crazy.
But he ended up here and filling in for Carson Palmer, and he did a really good job, and his career just kind of took off after that. 2007, I don't really remember 2007 that much from a Bengals fan perspective. I do remember the Browns being pretty good. I remember the NFL that year. Obviously that was, definitely one of my most memorable Super Bowl experiences. I wasn't happy about it, but I was hoping the Patriots would finish off with an undefeated record that year, but Eli Manning got in the way. But the Bengals, I think that might have been because you remember me telling you how I bought that Fire Bratkowski shirt.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that might have been the year that we did fire Bratkowski. We lost to the Saints in the second game of the year. Wait, no, we didn't. What? Oh, no, in the second preseason game. Okay. Lost in the second preseason game. Beat the Ravens week 1, and then lost 4 games in a row, and then beat the Jets, and then lost 2 games in a row, and then kind of traded off the whole rest of the season to end up 7-9.
Yep.
Yeah. Obviously, we're a little bit off the rails at this point. So, you got anything else you want to say about the refs, Mikey?
No.
Okay. Well, yeah, that's pretty much it for today. You know, the sports show, I think, is canceled at this point. You know, it's not really anything going. We will still do the power rankings. But I think it's like so this week we're gonna do the power rankings tomorrow during the podcast during the game. But as I think about it, that might just be a more fun way to do power rankings, right? Like while the game's going on. That way, if you got to present your power rankings and defend them while a team is playing, and then maybe you're dead wrong about that team.
Yeah,
that sounds like a fun way to maybe do that. I don't know, but I think the sports show is pretty much canceled. So, you know, we might do more Wednesday episodes going forward if there's like a big topic to talk about, like the refs or something like that. But yeah, I think we're pretty much done with the sports show at this point.
Yeah.
So, yeah, for now, then I'll leave y'all as always with a who day.
Do that.
All right.